Uh, Kum Len and Abad Gemara. We are up to Daf Samach Tes Amud Aleph, and we were discussing about the obligation of a dowry. And we mentioned the last thing we looked about was that a dowry is different than a Tanai Ksuba. So anything you add on to the Ksuba, I'm trying to wonder why. And we said that one of the differences is that by a Tanai Ksuba, you cannot, including, let's say, the food that you have to provide for the daughters and the wife after the husband passed away. You cannot take it from fields that were unsold, but when it comes to the dowry, you could. Okay, and then we have now Rabbi Yechon. The last thing we learned was Rabbi Yechon disagrees with Rebbe. That's what Rebbe believes. Rabbi Yechon disagrees with Rebbe, and he says that neither one. He said that neither one, not for mezainis and not for dowry, can you go to collect from any properties that the children unsold. So we're up to about 15 lines on this top of the page. Rabbi Yechon seems to be arguing with his teacher Rebbe. The last two words of the lines, Ibaylu, about 15 lines from the top. Ibaylu, we asked a question. Let's understand Rabbi Yechon, who disagrees with his teacher Rebbe. He holds that even dowry you cannot collect from any property that were unsold by the children, after they inherited from the father's estate. He hadn't heard what his teacher Rebbe said. Would accepted it. Or he did hear and he just refused to accept it. Now this is fascinating because Rebbe was a Tana, Rabbi Yechon was an Amora. And there's a discussion whether, we know that Rav can argue with Tanoim because he was sort of right in between Tanoim and Amoraim. What about Rabbi Yechon? Rabbi Yechon is a younger student. So Tesha said that Rabbi Yechon couldn't, but here you see, and others say Rabbi Yechon also, if he wanted, he could have, and he's here right here. The Gemara seems to be comfortable with the idea that even though he heard what Rabbi said, who's a Tana, Rabbi Yechon felt that he can argue, not because he has any basis in a price or anything. He just felt he can argue, which seems to prove that Rabbi Yechon could argue also with Tanoim. But Toshma, we never really use it as whenever we ask a question of Yechon from a Bryce or a Mishnah, we never use that as an answer. Toshma, come here. The Itmar, we actually learned, it says, Misha if a person died, he left behind two daughters and a son. Now we know the son is the only one who inherits, but the daughters have these conditions that you have to take care of. They provide for them and you have to give them dowry. So there were two daughters and a son. So at the time, the daughters would not have inherited anything. So the first daughter is getting married. She got her dowry. The first one went ahead and got married. She took her 10%. But then, by the time the second girl was about to get married, or was going to get married, the son died, which means that now the entire inheritance shifts over to the daughters. So the question is the second daughter entitled to get her 10%? Because now she's getting an inheritance. Is her sister, who's also getting inheritance, obligated to give her part of the 10%, before they divide the rest of the estate, or not? The second girl loses out of 10%, she just gets inheritance. I don't understand. We go even worse. We say far greater than this. That even if let's say brothers inherited and they unsold the property to others, nevertheless, the girl's rights to this 10% entitlement is so strong that they can actually take it back from a person who purchased it. And the aim is when it comes to food, we don't take away from the fields that were sold. In other words, this is exactly Rebbe's opinion. And so in other words, this is how powerful their entitlement is about dowry. The children sold it to a third party who is totally unrelated, yet they have the power to collect from that field. You tell me, in this case over here, that the second girl just forfeits her 10%. Now, that's what Rabbi Chanina says. He argues with Rabbi Yechon. Says the Gemara, now, what he made a declaration of Chanina. Everyone knows that when it comes to Panosa, you can collect, but Bezainus you can't. And what do you mean everyone knows? Rabbi should have said, what do you mean everyone knows? I hold that you can't collect either one from the property that was sold. Rabbi doesn't protest. Means Rabbi Yechon must have then later heard what Rebbe said, because this is Rebbe's opinion, and must have changed his mind. Or if no, it's such. So first thing I wants to say that from here we see clearly Rabbi Yechon never heard. Rabbi Yechon definitely heard of Rebbe's opinion, because otherwise he sure said man amra. Wow, who says such an opinion? Rabbi Yechon personally held that you cannot collect it from the chasim shabadim from property that was sold, and Rabbi Yechon Chanina says yes we do. So he should have said who says that. Says the Gemara, so therefore, must be he heard what Rebbe said. And he heard Rebbe said, and nevertheless he argues. So we see the Gemara, in fact, has an assumption that Rabbi Yechon can argue with his teacher. So the Gemara, no. At the time when Rabbi Yechon argued with Rebbe, he hadn't heard Rebbe's opinion. From the Chishmila, as soon as he heard it, Kabbalah accepted, and he changed his mind. And he agreed with Chanina. He actually, once he heard that Rebbe said differently, he basically changed it, he retracted, and he agreed with Rebbe. No, so what's the difference? So how come the daughter doesn't get a 10% before they divide the estate? Shani could have a base, a big difference, because she's getting a lot more than 10% now. 10% was a special takana. You're not getting any inheritance, so you should have some dowry. But since this girl is getting her share of the Yerusha was greater than the 10% that she was going to get, she's getting 50%. Therefore, there's no reason to have that special kind of entitlement, and there's no reason why Chum should give her 10%. On the other hand, according to this, let's say she just happens to have a windfall, that she makes a lot of money, she wins the lottery, or she finds some money according to you, and when you don't need the 10%, you don't get it. You could have a base, we don't give it. It doesn't matter how rich you are. If we make a takana that every girl should get 10%, no matter how much money you have, no matter how rich she is, and she's marrying the richest guy in the world, you still have to give her 10% of the dowry. So what's the difference? Now she's getting inheritance. So the Gemara says, what do you see a difference? I'm saying that she's going to get from this very same asset that you want to give her 10%, she's getting 50. So there's no reason to make a takana. But if she makes money from elsewhere, of course the takana stays in place. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are, but if a person feels treated worse than her siblings, she feels let down. And therefore, we have to make sure that the rule applies to everybody, and we don't make an asset, we don't do any asset tests or anything like that. It applies to everybody. Oh, and it says, that Bas, this daughter who is getting the 10%, how do we treat the 10%? He considers that as if it's inheritance. It's treated like inheritance. So he said, it's like inheritance. So there's a big difference if we treat it like inheritance or we treat it just like a debt. For example, if it's a debt and the lender comes along and says, give him back our money, it's up to the borrower whether he gives them with cash or he pays them with property. If it's an inheritance, the other heirs can't say, okay, we'll give you money, whether you like it or not, we're keeping all the land. They have to give this, every heir is entitled to a part of that land. And not just of one land, but a piece of every piece of land. And then you have to negotiate. Since you tell me that there's a law like an heir, therefore, if the other heirs want to give her money instead, you can't just give her money. She's entitled to take part of that land as her 10%. You're right. Yes. Yes. Then the next question is, let's say they want to just give, okay, she's entitled to land, but they have a whole bunch of land, so they want to give her just one piece of land, so this is it. And this is equal to your 10%. According to you, if she's an heir, she said, no, I want a piece of every property. And the aggregate should be up to 10%. You're right. However, Rashi disagrees. The Meimad, he said, we treat the girl, the 10% of the girl, as if she's one of the debtors or creditor. She's a creditor, and therefore, very different laws, which means you want to give her money instead of land, you can. Even change his mind. How do I know that? The human said, I was once standing before a Meimad, but also he eats a woman came along, the Kameh before him. She came to claim her 10%, and I saw then, on his mind, the I felt then that he would have paskin if the question came up, that if they wanted to give him money instead of land, he would have acknowledged and said yes, which means that he changed his mind. He holds like Rav Ashi, it's only a creditor, and because she's only a creditor, then you could treat like a creditor, which means you can pay her out with cash rather than give her land. How do I know that? Because the Shomach, I heard her brother saying that he said to her, if we would have had cash, Salik Nebezuzi would have paid you with cash. The Ishtik and Ameima didn't say a word. Lamalami didn't say anything. Proves that he agreed with them in principle. Agreed on a principle. And Taisha said, Rabbein Tam said he learned from here. That whenever he sat by the Torah, and if one of the Balei didn't, one of the let's say the defendant or the plaintiff would exaggerate and say, make a comment, really you owe me 10 times more than what I'm claiming. Rabbein Tam would always stand up and say, it's not true. Even though it didn't really matter, like so it's just hyperbole. Rabbeinu Tam, because he was a judge and sitting there, people can misconstrue the fact that he overheard it, and say a word. People walk around saying, the guy Taka owes him 10 times more than what he claimed. Otherwise, because that's the whole proof of Ramayumi, because he just sat there, he heard a conversation between the brothers and the girl, and he didn't intervene. So, and we used from that to prove a halacha that a member agreed that if they had money, they could have paid the money, even though it was irrelevant. But you cannot just sit there and be quiet. When you're in a court, everything has to be, and make sure that everything that comes out of the court, nothing should be misconstrued. Talking about it further, now that we say that it's the creditor, whose creditor is it? It's the father's estate. He's the one who obligated himself to pay 10% of the daughters. Chacham says pay 10% of his daughters. He died, now it's passed on to the children. Is she considered the creditor of the father or the creditor of the children? And what's the difference? Big enough in halach. If it's the creditor of the father passes away, now wants to collect from the Yisayim, the orphans, you have to make a vow, you have to swear, and so on. But if it's your regular creditor, they don't have to swear. They can show that you owe the money, and they have to swear that you never paid me. And you have to also, what kind of field do you give? If the creditor of your father, you can give them Zabudi as the worst possible field, the lowest class. If it's a direct Balchayiv, it's a Bendi. We learn more about Baba getting that, for the Zikin, you pay Idi is the best field, you have to pay, and for Balchayiv, you pay Bendis, and for Ksuba, you pay Zabudius. Same thing here, the creditor of the father, you pay Zabudius. So that's the difference. And Mora asks the question, Mora says, she's a creditor, the Abba or the Achi, whose creditor is the fathers or the children or the brothers. So I'm going to the difference. The with the Bendis, that she collects from the average field, and does he have to swear? Or is the Buddhist, or she collects only the Buddhist and with a shvur, with a vow. So which one is it? Tashma coming here, the Ravina Agbe Lebarti Ravashi. Ravashi passed away, and his daughter wanted to get her 10%. Ravashi had a few sons. He had a son called Mar, and he had a son called Rav Sama. He also had other sons. And Mar still lived, but Rav Sama passed away. So now you're dealing with Rav Ashi's estate, and Rav Sama passed away before Rav Ashi passed away. So you're dealing with Rav Ashi's estate. You're dealing with, and you want your 10%, from the entire estate. So you have part of it is coming out of Mar's portion of the inheritance, and part of it's coming out of Sama's children's part of the inheritance. Mar is talking as its own, and the children of Sama are talking about their father's debts. So it says like this: Mar Ravashi Baini. So for Mar Ravashi, her let's say his share of the 10%, she collects Baini because she is his creditor, so she collects Baini the average field, which didn't have to swear. But Nebreder and Avashi was a very wealthy man, so she's getting quite a large amount. The Gemara says in Gittin that Toida Gedula b'Makamecha from Yehuda Hanosi to Ravashi, there's no one equal to that. And the Breder of Ravashi, and from the son of Ravashi, she collected because it's not their place, it's their father's. Is Zabudi's Bishvur. So we see clearly from here which creditor she's not the creditor of the person who's deceased, but from the children. But Rav Sama, would have inherited, then passed it on to his children. So therefore, and we have a concept called mishmush bakever, that the grandchildren collect through their father, not they take the place of the father. It says the father in the caver takes inheritance and he passes on to the children. So therefore, we're seeing more Yeshnechel and Barbashim, they pair it there. So therefore, the grandchildren, it's not their commitment, it's their father's commitment. So you collect from the worst possible field and you have to swear. But for Mar, Baravashi, directly, Baininis and Noshua. So Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yosef, sent to Rabbi Baravuna, sent the message Rabbi Huna, Zuta Menadoi, Ki Asya Ha'itl Kamach. When this woman comes before you, is Agba Isa Lechasim. I'm not sure why it's called Rabbi Baravuna Zuta. It's Rabbi, the son of Rabbi Huna, that we normally have. We even had stories about Rabbi Huna, how he raised his son Rabbi. But anyway, this woman comes before you. I want you to give her 10% chasim. Afila meets trubla. She gets from properties. She gets it from assets. And I want you to give even from the trubla, even from the mill, and the base of the mill, she can collect on that as well. That's considered karka, land. When we were talking about Kana, we used to collect for her afila ma'amola the basi, even from the rent of the houses, because the rent of the house, it's cash, is coming from a property, it's coming from a house, and therefore it's considered as if it's karka. Tesh already asks, if it's the rent that will be coming from the property, of course that's karka, that's not considered metaltlin. And if we're talking about the rent that was already collected, that now actually is metaltlin. Why should she collect from it? So Taisa says we're talking about a case over here that there's a yearly rent, and now we're talking about in middle of the year, and right in the middle of the year, and so therefore you already owe for half of a year, and you already owe for half a year, and you what do you call that money from the first half of the year, even though you already lived there already, that money is not considered metalton, because the way it works when it comes to rent, ain't chilas mishtalem is el b'sayf. You don't really owe the money till the very end of the period. So therefore, it's still considered karka, and that's the chiddush. It's still considered that rent, even though you already all lived there already. But since you didn't become obligated till later on, it's considered the money that comes from karka. It says a little further, Yosef of Sheshes, what's another story? Shalach Rav Huna sent directly a letter to Rav Huna, and he called him Huna Chavrin. Huna, who said Huna Chavrin, Huna my friend, Shalom, peace be to you. And he spoke to him a little bit disrespectfully. He called him like an equal. Huna my friend. When this one comes before you, give her 10%. I already, I'm in my business. We decided she's right, but she's going to your town, so please, give it to her. Yosef Rav Sheshes came out. Rav Sheshes was saying before Rav Huna, and he saw Rav Huna was very insulted. Amalei Rav Huna said to him, Zil, Amalei, I want you to go and pass the following message, exactly in the words I'm saying verbatim. And you'll be put in chedim if you don't say exactly what I told you to say. And this is what you say: on. Not only don't give him the title of Rebbe, call him twice on, as if this is like a little kid. On. Where do you want me to collect from land or from metalton, from portable items? Which one do you want me to collect from? And we learned before one of the differences between parnasa and a dowry. And Mezainis says a dowry collects from metalton or karka, and the Mezainis gets only from karka. Except the Rebbe disagreed. He held that actually you can collect dowry from both, but we hold that you can collect Mezainis also you collect from both. But we hold that only dowry collect from both. So which one do you want me to collect from, metalton or karka? But he wrote, I want you to say it in a disrespectful way. Also, Rav Sheshes came to Rabbanan, went to Rabbanan, and he was very, he didn't want to be disrespectful. This is what he says: Mar Rabba, you are a great man, he says to Rabbanan. But Rav Huna Rabba, the Rabba, but Rav Huna is even greater. He threatened to put me in chedim if I don't say exactly these words. So please don't take offense. Please don't lay it out. Don't get offense from me. If you wouldn't have threatened me with chedim, I wouldn't even have used these words. On. So he quoted Rav Huna's word. On. Where do you want me to collect for this woman her dowry? From the land or from the entitlement? And that's question number one. Question number two: Uman Yosef be mazicha bereisha. And tell me, in the house of an oval, he used the word mazicha. Who sits in the head of the table? Also, one coming out of a quilt. One came out of a and trying to book for. Amalei is very offended. Chazi mar hechi shalach lehuna on. Did you see what the Huna did? He called me on like I'm some little kid. Number one. Number two, mazicha the shalach, he died in my ears. That's like me. He asked me a question about marzach. Who sits at the head of the table? What in the world is a marzach? Amalei said, Marukwa, who was then the head of the bezin, said to him, Emily, tell me, tell me exactly in essence what happened. He told him the whole story. A person who doesn't know what mazicha is, which is a pasuk in Tanakh, you call Huna your friend. My mazicha, what tak is mazicha? A mourner. If you don't know what a mazicha is, how you tak nothing? He outclassed you, and taka you had no right to call him Huna. And the Chesivos says, how do I know the word mazicha means the house of a mourner? It says, Koyim Hashem. If this is what Hashem says, Al Toved Beis Marzeh, don't come into the house of a Marzeach, which is the house of mourning, and don't go mourn. Hashem told you not to go mourn, and so on. So therefore, you had no right to say it. Meanwhile, we're at it. What's the answer? Oh, a woman. I know the oval sits ahead of the table in his house when he's during the morning. It says the pasuk, Evcha Darkum. Eve said, I chose my ways, their ways. The Eishav Roish, I sit at the head of the table. The Eshkan Kamela Bagdud, I'm sitting like a king over the army. Kasher Avelim, like a mourners, Yenachem. So see that the mourners, I'm sitting at the head of the table, he says it. He says the Eishav Roish. So you want to ask, Yenachem means Yenachem Achem, that others console him. So on the contrary, it's the consoler who sits at the head of the table, not the mourner. It says Yenuchum. Even though the pasuk says Yenachem, as if it says Yenuchum. That's what some Rishonim say. And so Tosa says it could have said Minach. If it meant the morning, I should have said Minach. And because it says Yenachem, normally Yenachem means also to pass condolences, but because it should have said Minach, as Yenachem, we read it as if it says Yenuchem, that he should be on the receiving end. That's what Tosa says. Rashi has a whole thing there that really, if it meant Yenachem, it should have been an aleph after the nun. That's how I know it means a pasach. Yeah, if in order to be a pasach, you have to have an aleph or a hey right after it. And because it's there's no aleph, so it must be the only reason why we say Yenachem is because that's tradition, not because the word itself says Yenachem. The word itself does not say Yenachem, because Yenachem would have been an aleph there. So the word itself is Yenuchem. But of us, we have a tradition to read Yenachem. So therefore, because the word itself is Yenuchem, we read as if it says Yenuchem, and it's the Yenuchem, the one on the receiving end, it says head of table. Taisus finds that very, very difficult. The fact is that's a tradition, and therefore it's Yenachem, not Yenuchem. It's because it said it because it should have said Menachem. Yeah, the marking is further. I bring another passage. Marzutra Amar from the following passage where it says, "Misar Mirzach Sruchim." You should remove from the Mirzach from the house of Elam Sruchim. Those are defect. What does it mean? So we'll touch. Marzach is two words. Mar, those are bitter. V'zach, those are a bit lightheaded. And he sort of can't concentrate. Nasa Sadal Sruchim. They become the head of the Sruchim. In other words, he sits ahead of the table. Omar was a Rabbi. And now, let's forget everything we learned till now is Rabbi. Hilchel, what's the final rule? That you collect only from land. We learned before, Rebbe holds you collect dowry and mezainis from land or metaltlin. We said that we take dowry from metaltlin or karka and mezainis only from karka. He said the halach is that even dowry only from karka. Mikarka le metaltlin bein le mezaina. Everything's only karka. So we see clearly from here that Mazonis also is only karka. Just the Go'anim came along and made a special takana that for Kesuvos today, a woman collect from talcum as well. Next. The person put in, we have the concept of an apotrufus and a shlish. Apotrufus is somebody, a general overseer of the state. He manages all the state of affairs. That's an apotrufus. A shlish is somebody that have given a special mission, special directive. So hamashlish moiz lebita, somebody gave money to a shlish. He said, I want you to use this money and take care of my daughter, and I want you to buy her a field or some kind of an investment so that she can live off that, or I want you to use that for the dowry. So it's a special mission. She says, Neman Bali Alai, and she says to this shlish, I don't need you to give the money over, hand it over to my husband. I trust him that he will look out for me and take care of me. Yasa hashlish mashahushus biyode. Divrei says he should not listen. The person who died gave you special instructions. You need to comply. You need to adhere to those instructions, and therefore do not give it over to the daughter. You go ahead and buy the land, whatever the instructions were exactly. Why? Because it's a mitzvah lekayim divrei hames. A mayor says you have to listen to the dying words of a mace. Now, this idea, mitzvah lekayim divrei hames, a person right before he dies, makes no difference if the person was dying or healthy. But the last word that he says, you have to carry out, as Tesa says on the next page. Abiesi says, it doesn't make sense. Let's say the shlish goes ahead and buys a field. The moment he buys a field for her, she has the right to turn around and sell it. In other words, she has total control. So if she says to him, look, don't bother buying the field and me selling it, just give me the money. Of course she can do that. Why not? She can sell it immediately. So therefore, Rabbi says, might as well listen to her and give her the money. But when are we saying that? Only a girl that is able to sell. She has to be an adult. Even though the Gemara Babasa we're going to learn says that you have to be 20 years old before you're mature enough to sell properties, that's talking about, like inheritance properties. But here, this is this is not inheritance property. Therefore, it's like about chayv, and therefore she can buy and sell. That's what it means. Or even if we say preferably she be 20 years old, nevertheless, if she sold it less than that, it's still a valid sale. But she's an adult. But if she's a minor, ain't maisik tanaklum, she cannot sell, she cannot threaten I'll sell it. So then the shlish should carry out the instructions of the man. Now, who is actually saying that? We're not sure if the Rebbe Rabbi Yossi will soon say. The Braisa that delineates much further. If somebody, let's say, gives to a third party and says, I want you to take care of this for my son-in-law who's getting married, and reasons for my daughter who's getting married, my son-in-law, I want you to buy a field for my daughter. She says, she said, I trust my husband, implicitly give it to him in Anasuyan. If they're already married, she's in total control. Why? Because even the father surely wanted her to be independent. Once she gets married, that's it, it's over. And she only gave it to the hand of a third party until she gets married. But if she's merely engaged, but if she's merely engaged, Rameh now introduces a new concept. Depends if she's married or she's engaged. If she's married, she can, even Rameh agrees, you don't give it to her, that's it. But when do I say that you have to carry out instructions, precisely according to the letter? If she's merely engaged. Divrei Rameir. Rabbi Yossi says, it's not a question of married or engaged, it's a question of an adult or a minor. Hagdol, she's an adult, which means if she wants, as soon as you buy the field, she can turn around and sell it, and Bein Min and Bein Min and Edison should be other. She's in total control, so might as well just give her the money. But Tana, a minor who cannot sell, therefore Bein Min and Bein Edison, either way, since she cannot threaten you to sell it, then Yasa Hasholish Mashusha Biyadi should do the same thing. So my benayu. So what is the difference between Rameir and him? Are they arguing regarding an adult? That Rabbi Yossi says an adult, you always give her the money, and according to Rameir, only if she got married to give her the money. But if she's only engaged, you don't give the money. Or are they arguing by Aktana? This is how Rashi is. Or they're arguing by Aktana that a minor, Rameir says that if she's married, even Aktana, you have to give her the field because she trusts her husband. And Rabbi says, no, you don't give the field. Tosha says no. Says by Aktana, nobody disagrees. Everyone agrees by Aktana, she can't. The question is by a Gdoila or not. If we're going to say if you want to say that the difference is a Aktana, according to get married, the mayor is easy and says, oh, if she's get married, you give it to her. The mayor should be other. I want that you give it to her. Let me hold, even if she's a minor, when she's married, you give it to her and you give it to her husband. But also, Rabbi Yossi is strict and says, no, if she's a minor, you don't listen to her at all. Not me. That even if she's married, only if she's an adult, the aim is safer. Then look at it says in the end of our Mishnah, these words. In the end of our Mishnah, it says that a minor, whatever she does, whatever she says, is meaningless. Who's the author of that? If the author is Rabbi Yossi, holds that Aktana can't do anything, which Rabbi Yossi holds. We already know that from the first part of the Mishnah. Why? Because Rabbi Yossi said, what's the logic? That she can sell it. So everyone knows she can only sell when she's an adult. So obviously when she's a minor, she can't sell, she doesn't collect. It remains in the hand of this third party. He writes to the she won't sell it. She can sell it now. So G'dayla, it's obviously G'dayla Bazvini, only an adult that can sell in. Ktana, La Bazvini Loy, but a Ktana who cannot sell low is cannot. Ella Rameir. So the Gemara always knew that Rameir holds that an adult girl, Nasuya according to Rameir, can sell. The question is, and Rabbi Yossi also, they both agree. The question is, they also argue by Ktana or not. The question is, Rameir also say that a Ktana, even if she's married, even if she's a Ktana, if she's married, you give the money over to her. So Gemara is going to conclude, no, the author of our Mishnah is Rameir, and the last part of the Mishnah, it says, but Aktana ain't Maisek Tana Kulum, but Rameir was saying that. In other words, when do I say that you do not give it, leave it in the hands of Shalosh, you give it to her, is only if she got married as an adult. But if she's only engaged, you don't give it to her. And Rabbi says, no, if she's an adult, regardless engaged or married, you give it to her. I'm missing some words. The should carry on the structure. She's engaged. I'm going to say married. It should be other. The older, younger. Nothing. The difference is an adult who is engaged. According to the mayor, you have to listen to the mace. According to Yossi, hand it over to her. Eat what we learned. The good says halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Now, what the difference is an adult or a minor? That even if she's an adult, she has to be married. If she's only engaged, we don't say that. Ilfa, remembering we had the more kindness that Rabbi and Ilfa were standing there next to a wall, and they're both becoming a chamim, and the baskel came out and said, "Oh, this person will come a godla der," and only Rabbi heard the baskel. Ilfa didn't hear it. Ilfa went off in business, and Rabbi remained the famous Rabbi stayed and learned. And when Ilfa came back and he heard about it, Ilfa says, I'm still the biggest Talmud Chacham. Ask me any question, ask me anything. But he said more times, ask me any question and I'll give you a source for it in Mishnayos. In fact, we had Ilfa a number of times in Kutchin where he had an opinion. Didn't have it too many other places. But here the Gemara says the same thing again, I guess happened the same day. That different people came over to him and said, well, this is what the Brisa says. Find me a source in the Mishnah. Ilfa, he suspended himself by the sails of a ship. And the reason why he did that is because the Gemara will Erevin, that the Torah is not by those people who travel a lot and are sailors, and he wants to prove them wrong. Amri says, can anybody come forward and bring me a brisa that was said in the Yeshiva Rabbi Chia, which is the most reliable? And I won't find your source in the Mishnah. If I don't find you in the Filna Maskarya V'Tavana, I'm going to jump off the ship and I'm going to drown myself. Nobody was so sure that he can find it. Also, so it came along an old man. Tunnelly, he said, I'll tell you the following. It says, someone says, is a person who's on his deathbed. He said, I want you to continue to take care of my children. I want you to give them a shekel every single week so that they can sustain themselves. But the problem is that half a shekel is not sufficient. A shekel is not sufficient. You need 2 shekels more a seller to provide for them. We understand that the father didn't want to punish them, only give them 2 shekels. He thought that was enough, but if it wasn't, he would have gladly given them more. But if he uses the words I'll titnu lehem el shekel, I don't want you to give them more than a shekel, then he's very pedantic. Then ain't no give them a shekel. But he says Imesu Yishu Achen. Maybe he says, look, if my children pass on and they still have some of the estate left, I don't want to go to their children. I want to go to somebody else. Then if he says, give them a shekel, regardless if he uses the words, don't give them more. If he doesn't say that, since he wants there should be some reserves left over, then it's obvious he was very pedantic, only a shekel. The Ben Shama Tnu, whether he said the word Tnu, Ben Shama Al Titnu, whether he just said give them a shekel, or whether he said don't give them more than a shekel, ain't no a shekel, or you give them a shekel, because he wants to have some money left over, or some of the state left over to pass on to another party. Amalei, so they asked her, Ilfa, how many? Where does this come from? So the Ilfa answered, Ramei and Al Mishnah. What did Ramei and Al Mishnah say? The girl says, give me the money that my father wants for the dowry, and the question is, should the shlish carry out the instruction of the father to buy her a property? Not that Meir says, mitzvah lekayim divra mes. It says that the shlish should carry out the instructions because there's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of a mace. So, and that is traces right here on the page. Even a healthy person, these are the last words that he says, you have to carry out his instructions. And Tyson asks a very interesting question. We have a rule that the words of a mace, if a person is on his deathbed, even though he didn't write a contract, divrei of a shchivra, the words of a shchivra is kiksuvin u'mesurin, as if it was written in the contract, as if he handed over. No, you have to do everything right. And the question is, what do we need that law for? When if we say mitzvah kind of a mess, whatever the mace says, you have to carry out the instructions. Even a healthy person, but it's the last word you have to carry out. So what do you have to add? And divrei hames, as if it's written and it's transacted already. So Taisa says that this law of mitzvah kind divrei mess, very interesting, is very limited. Is only limited to a case where he actually appointed a third party and he gave him specific instructions what to do. Then it becomes like a mitzvah kind divrei mess. Yeah, and that's number one, which usually we say mitzvah kind of murder, whatever the instructions are. Taisa limits it to where the instructions are very clear, and he already set up he already established a person to do and gave him exact instructions. It's not a general rule. Or he says that when do we say mitzvah kind of mace? When he already gave the money over to that also that only if the person was still the receiving person was alive and everything was done at that time. But let's say the receiving person wasn't alive yet or whatever for the future, you wouldn't have to listen. But divrei shchivra dummy is in all instances. Anyway, let's finish. Whichever way he says it, you have to provide for the kids, even if it's clearly don't give them more than a shekel. But if they need a seller, you have to give them a seller. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? What happened to the rule of a mitzvah kind of a mess? So he says, in any other regard, yes, you have to listen to what the May says. But regarding taking care of his children, he definitely is happy that the children should be able to live. So it doesn't matter what he said. He's definitely happy. So why did he only say give them a shekel when they need to sell it? He wants to give them an incentive they should go out and get a job and not just sit home and do nothing. So therefore, he sort of said, I want them to give a shekel, so they're going to get out there and try to get a job or get a trade or something. The Tanahas we learned, Haputas, young little kids who are like 9 or 8 years old, is the Chacham, especially the kind of the sale, whatever they buy is a purchase, whatever they sell is a sell. Where? By metalton, not by land. By land, you have to be an adult. And Rashi says, interesting, either an adult or 20 years old. As if there's a choice, or there's different people depending what it is, or depending what kind of property it is. Rafa said it's not talking about Elisha ain't Shama Patrufas, it's about overseeing the state. For a kid, if he has somebody taking care of all the needs, then there's no reason to make a special takana that they can buy and sell. Give it over to that Patrufas, the one who's overseeing their estate. Ain't Mekha, there's no reason why the purchase should be a purchase, but ain't Mekha not a sale. Then my how do I know? But it says ain't my Tana club. Says our Mishnah clearly, whatever a Tana does, a youngster does, is meaningless. Says the Gemara, but the Mishnah is talking about a shlish, shining. Maybe the Mishnah is talking about a shlish, which is much more than an overseer. Shlish has special instructions and specific instructions. Maybe only then do we say that a kid's activities are meaningless. But an apatrufus, who's just a general overseer, maybe the kid's activities are meaningful. Says the Gemara. Because what would happen to a brewer sells in order to have money they should eat? So they did the same thing. Why does the Mishnah then just say a general rule, Ktana is nothing? Just say by a Ktana, the Shlish should not listen to the Ktana and do whatever has to be done. My Ktana Klum makes such a statement that the activities of a Ktana is meaningless. In any respect, if there's an apatrufus as well who's overseeing the state, there's no reason for the child to be able to buy or sell anything. According to Rabbeinu Chananel, is only limited to selling. A child cannot sell. But if they want to give a gift, they definitely can give gifts. Because when it comes to a gift, what's the difference in apatrufus and apatrufus? When it comes to sell, the apatrufus will sell to make money. The apatrufus can't give gifts on your behalf to other people because he doesn't know who to give gifts to. So therefore, we don't take away the right of a child if they want to give away gifts according to Rabbeinu Chananel. Others disagree.